Losing faith begins quietly with disillusionment. In my previous video, I shared a childhood story where when I was going to church, I used to believe that angels were responsible for this beautiful sound of bells during communion. After sitting closer one day, I realized that it was just an altar boy ringing the bells by his side. And at the end of my video, I had said that I hoped those watching would sit closer to their own altars to see who's really responsible for that beautiful sound. So in this video, I'd like to take a moment to dive deeper into what I meant by that. We all worship at an altar, and it doesn't have to be a religious one. It's about faith in general, who we have faith in or what we have faith in. And the altar you worship could be your president, could be your political party, or someone you love, someone, a family, friend, or mentor that you might have, someone that you've placed on a pedestal. Grieving this loss is very painful, and it's a universal feeling. It's deeply agonizing, but the healing is worth it. So it took me years, many years, to grieve the loss of my faith. Not just in my religion, which that was the biggest one, but what I believed in politically and people in my life. The contradictory beliefs I held slowly just collapsed beneath me. I remember when I was a teenager, obviously it mattered greatly to me at the time. I struggled with ideas about celibacy. I also struggled with the church's stance on gay marriage. I just couldn't understand why that was such a horrible thing to do, why it was so inherently wrong, and why the consequences for not repenting for those things were so severe and absolute. Hell, is pretty serious. And everyone had always told me that God doesn't make mistakes. You know, we're born the way we are, and we're supposed to be perfect. And yet, the church's stance just didn't match with that in my mind, no matter how many explanations or how many answers I was given. When I finally cared enough to ask in my youth group, in my catechism classes, the answers I received never truly satisfied me. I had accepted it at the time, like I accepted a lot of things, because I trusted these people. But deep inside, those answers continued to bother me. And I remember once I had gone to confession, and a priest had asked me, "What do you think you did wrong?" And that question struck me very deeply. I remember kind of scoffing. And I remember that my biggest sin I felt was that I didn't feel like I was being genuine in my religion. This was when I was really starting to lose my faith. I was becoming a little bitter and cynical, but I also held on to those beliefs so strongly that I felt like I was doing wrong simply by just feeling like this is just not vibing with me. He told me something along the lines that just the fact that I wanted to pray, just the fact that I wanted to be genuine was enough for God. And at the time, that felt good enough for me to just continue with my faith while asking questions. I was a big Harry Potter fan, and I had already read 2 or 3 books by the time I became very fanatic. And there was another major source of cognitive dissonance because of it, because there were so many different leaders in my church that had different opinions about Harry Potter. Remember, this was Harry Potter when it was still new, and it was just spreading like wildfire amongst kids and getting kids to read. But then there were extremist groups talking about how they were of the devil, witches, wizards. Anyway, there was a group leader whom both I and a relative of mine admired very deeply, and we saw her kind of like a prophet. And she once declared that Harry Potter was of the devil. But my youth group leader, when I asked him about it, he didn't exactly agree, but he didn't disagree. He kind of shrugged it off, like, why read Harry Potter when you can read about the saints? And I was like, ugh, guilt. Catholic guilt. But then there was a visiting seminarian, somebody actually studying to become a priest, who was actually really annoyed by the fact that there were so many people in the church worried about these books. He basically said there was nothing wrong with the books and that people just needed to get over it. These wildly different takes on something that was so minor struck me very hard, even though I don't think I knew it at the time. So these little things started creating cracks in the foundation, and my inherent curiosity just kind of cracked them wider. I started turning to friends outside of my religion who shared the same doubts I did and had their own varied opinions. There's a reason why extremist groups and cults demonize education and higher learning and just going outside of the bubble. It's why there are so many conspiracy theories claiming that universities are turning people into Marxists. For the record, I didn't lose my faith in college or become a progressive because I was indoctrinated into being a liberal. I was indoctrinated into being the exact opposite from very little to into my teenage years. So what happened in college was the exact opposite. And I don't even have that much higher formal education to begin with. I have an associate's in arts. But I've always been an avid reader, and I still am. And I love to learn. What changed was that I finally had access to more information, which gave me the tools to make up my own mind about these things. Not because I felt like I was now an expert on the subject that I wasn't an expert on before. It's just I had enough information to disprove what I was already believing in. I didn't need to be an expert on history or theology or philosophy to understand that there were just some things that were plain wrong. I became more aware of logical fallacies because I was exposed to more logic. The last thing manipulative people want is for you to become aware, to become more informed. What many today refer to as becoming woke. If they don't want you informed, what do they want you? They want you misinformed or uninformed. If they don't want you aware, what do they want you? Unaware. And if they don't want you woke, they most certainly want you asleep. Why do you think some people are saying outrageous things right now about empathy, like empathy is evil or a weakness? Empathy, by definition, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And the only way to do that is by being exposed to someone else's perspective, by receiving information you didn't have before meeting them. Cult leaders, abusers, and manipulative organizations fear that if you're exposed to that information or contrary opinions, facts, or just someone else's perspective, that they will in turn be exposed as what they really are, a fraud, someone who doesn't have all the answers, someone who's lied. Asking questions, whether it's in a cult, religion, workplace, or even an abusive relationship, puts a target on your back. It marks you as potentially disloyal, someone who cannot be controlled. Once you are exposed to the truth about a person or belief that you cherish deeply, it starts to lose its power over you. And that's the last thing these people want. Others around you will notice it, and they will notice it real fast. And then the backlash starts. Little temper tantrums. In abusive relationships, it can be a rage spiral. It could be triangulation. This happens on a larger scale as well. In cultish communities, leaders or their followers single you out. They'll start drama, trying everything they can to keep you under control. And if they can't, they discard you. The worst thing, and ultimately the best thing that ever happened to me, was being shunned by my youth group friends. I was frozen out of a community that had become a vital part of my life. I felt as though I had lost my home. And since my own family home life was already chaotic, I was left feeling completely lost. I continued going to church, singing in the choir, and even attended different Catholic churches just to avoid seeing people or things that would remind me of painful memories. Being cut off from my community like that was it felt like a slow death of a piece of myself. And believe me, I was desperately trying to hold on to it. Nobody wants to lose their comfort or a place where they felt safe. And my heart really goes out to anyone who's ever experienced this or who's experiencing this right now. I'm not sure if I want to include this, but when I was in high school and I was losing these friendships, new friends came into my life. And I remember one of them being so upset with me because she said I was like a gambler that kept going back to this one friend trying to gamble on whether they were going to pay attention to me or not, or offer me their friendship again or not. And it just wasn't happening. When I had her, this friend, in front of me, right there, ready to give me their friendship and their love. I'm glad that friend said that to me, to my face, because it's true. Anyway, in my desperate attempt to hold on to my faith, I wanted to sit closer to the altar. I wanted to hang on to the altar. So I did get closer. I immersed myself in theology, history, sociology, anthropology. I even took meteorology in college. And so I started learning about the true history of Christianity and Catholicism, including some troubling aspects. I was also taking a critical thinking and ethics class that really challenged my beliefs. There was even a music appreciation class where we had a very outspoken atheist professor. I think he was a little more than that, an anti-theist. And yes, there is a difference. I guess what I'm trying to say is that by finally sitting as close as I could to the things that I believed and worshipped, the more I realized that the foundation of these beliefs were flawed to begin with. The cracks were already there, and eventually the entire foundation collapsed. And I felt very lost for a very long time. My path into extremism started at age 14. By the time I was 24, I had completely stopped going to church except for maybe special occasions. It wasn't something I actively sought to do. It simply happened over time through the 5 stages of grief, like falling out of love. I encourage everyone to look up betrayal trauma because that's exactly how it feels to lose your faith. Like betrayal. You trusted, you believed, and you invested so deeply into something or someone you thought guided you correctly. To lose that is devastating. Nobody wants to feel that way. But this loss ultimately opened the door to actual healing, real freedom, and authenticity. The journey was difficult. It wasn't until I hit 30 that I came to a conscious realization that I just didn't need it anymore. I didn't need the judgment, the guilt. I didn't need the expectations. I didn't need to explain the unexplained. I could live my life on my terms and just be a good person, striving to be happy. I'm 38 now. I don't go to church anymore at all. And though I didn't choose to lose my faith, and the process hurt like hell, I'm deeply grateful that in its place I found my truth. And I really hope that whoever is watching this, who has gone through this or is going through this, doesn't feel as alone anymore. Therapy helps a lot, by the way. Started going to therapy at 26 and I highly recommend it. Remember that I am not a licensed therapist. Yes, I have gone to years of therapy to work through these issues, but this is not a replacement for therapy. So please go get professional help if you think you really need it.